If you're in business, you probably have a website, but can your site handle your growth? How many visitors before your site slows down or crashes? What about storage and data security? From web hosting to virtual servers, Pair Networks provides the online infrastructure you need to start, grow, and flourish. When it comes to security and updates, don't worry, we've got you covered. Our 24/7 US-based customer support is the best in the industry. No frustrating chatbots or sitting on hold for hours. Check out pair.com today to learn more. That's PAIR.com.
This is a special announcement for my delighted customers, podcast listeners. Hey, if you're a CX leader who has the fundamentals down but is struggling to get executive buy-in, this course is designed specifically for you. It's called the Trusted Guide Roadmap, and it's a masterclass. I'm offering a special discount for podcast listeners who sign up for the 5-week course that begins on June 5th. Use this link, www.empoweredcx.com/delighted, and save $100 off the registration fee. That's empowered, empoweredcx.com/delighted. There's still time to register for the next Trusted Guide Roadmap Masterclass, but time is running out, so don't delay.
The Agile brand.
Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast, now part of the Agile Brand Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mark Slayton, and I am so glad you're here. I empower leaders to delight their customers, and I talk to guests with a wide range of expertise who share meaningful insights, wisdom, and practical tips that you can use immediately. And now, on to the show. Well, I am very excited for my guest today, who is a returning guest. Gary David is a professor of sociology and experience design at Bentley University in Waltham, Mass. And Gary is a friend. He is one of the smartest people I know, and he is a great professor at Bentley. What is really fascinating about Gary is where his perspective on customer experience comes largely from sociology. And that is an aspect I love to kind of poke the edges of CX and broaden the lanes that we talk about CX in for CX leaders in particular, but others interested to see how it all kind of fits together and works so that we can improve the lives of the people that we serve, we call customers. So Gary, welcome to the show.
Thanks. And so you're setting expectations really high, and I don't know whether I should be grateful or resentful because now I have to live up to them. So thank you.
Well, welcome. Obviously, you did something right to be back on the show, or something wrong.
Second date. This is our second date.
Yeah, it only took a little over a year.
That's okay. I'll take it. Sometimes
All right.
things that you have to go play the field a little bit. You have to try out other guests to see how they work, to see if there's a connection, to see if there's a spark. Clearly, there wasn't, and so you came back to me to settle for me. So I appreciate that.
You're most welcome, and I'm honored to have you back on the show. You've done all this research over the years on sociology, on things like how buyers make decisions. God, that's so fascinating to understand. And it's what you've expanded my thinking on is that it's wider and broader than what we think it is. It's easy to say, well, it's just price, or it's function of the product, or it's comfort. Well, there's really a lot more layered into that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We'll talk about the impact of identity on buyers and their experience. Gary, so let's first, if you could, give some folks a little bit more about your background, because I kind of jumped into it. So what did I leave out that you want to make sure people know?
I mean, not much really. I am a professor of sociology. That's where I'm trained. That's how I approach everything from more of a social and systems perspective. So much of experience design, especially if you look at user experience, even customer experience, approaches things from an individual unit of analysis. What's going on in the mind, the psychology of users, the psychology of buyers or customers. And while that's important, you can't separate the individual from the social. It's just impossible. We are all social beings fundamentally. And in order to understand the larger dynamics of any of these things, whether it be patients, users, customers, employees, students, whatever, we need to look at the social and include the social. And so being a sociologist then obviously comes in handy to do so. So that's how I like to approach all of experience design, is from more of a social systems-based understanding and using the concepts, theories, and principles of sociology to help inform my understanding of these topics.
All right. So Gary, if I'm a CX leader or a CEO or C-suite leader, why should I care? It sounds like it could be all really soft, fluffy, touchy-feely stuff. This idea of what's going on in the buyer's mind. Why is it a big deal?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with soft, fluffy, touchy-feely things, number one. I mean, so much of marketing, so much of our purchasing decisions, as we know, is based upon emotion, right? And it's based upon emotion, not just as it's individually felt, but also socially constructed and experienced. There's this burgeoning area of sociology of emotions that those emotions are not just about what I individually feel, but also how those feelings are expected to be felt and how those feelings are felt through different prisms of my social identity, how it resonates with me as a social being of different groups. And so the touchy-feely part, absolutely right, because we know touchy-feely matters. And that if we don't go for the touchy-feely, then we're missing out on a lot of opportunity to connect with the audiences with whom we're trying to connect.
Yeah. And let me push you a little bit to extend that. The audiences we're trying to connect, like translate that for the CEO. How does that translate to outcomes?
When we think about who we are as not just people, but as people who belong to social groups, one of the things I like to do with my students is something called a 20 questions inventory. And it simply starts with the statement, I am a or an blank. And the students are expected to fill in a noun. And the idea, this is taken from the 20 statements inventory from Iowa School of Sociology. The idea is the ones that they put higher up are more salient. They matter more to people who are responding than the ones further down. So I am a father. I am a professor. I am a husband. I am a runner. I am a blank, 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 whatever. And we can also then place those identities on a social identity wheel, whether those things relate to things like gender or race or ethnicity or marginalized identities, or how it places us in relation to others in society. So why does all that matter? Well, if something's strongly felt, if an identity is strongly held, then we have to make sure we're on point with how we communicate that aspect of our product or our service or offerings in relation to that identity, and also be careful and mindful of what our messaging and our products and our placement can do in activating different identities, especially in different social or contemporary contexts. One part of our identity might not matter that much right now, but something might happen a week from now, and now all of a sudden it matters immensely. And so these things are very fluid. And so if the CEO or the C-level person needs to have an awareness of what's happening out there in the world in order to understand how those things might be impacting their products, their brands, and the experiences they're creating.
Yeah. Gary, you had shared another example of the brand Yeti
Yeah.
relative to that. Would you mind sharing that with the audience?
Yeah, this was a fun one. A lot of people blew up a lot of very expensive coolers because Yeti can be a very expensive brand. I have Yeti mugs. I think they're made with some kind of black magic or sorcery, because my only complaint about Yeti is that my coffee stays too hot too long. I would like I would like an adjustment setting on my Yeti thermos to put it exactly where I want to let it dissipate heat. Yeti, that's a free product advice for you. No charge.
Yeti, if you're
So,
listening, there you go.
what do you mean if? Yeti, we know you're listening to this highly rated podcast. So, make sure you include that in your next product design.
We'll expect to see that in the next iteration.
Absolutely. So one of the things that Yeti did was they had certain kinds of programs for different organizations that allowed for a discount. If you were a member of that organization and you bought your product, you can get like a whatever percent discount. We all know this kind of relationship in organizations we belong to. And Yeti was moving from that kind of offering into a different set of offerings. The details here aren't important, but the point is it wasn't aimed at the NRA. Again, pardon the pun. It wasn't for the NRA. They weren't taking away from the NRA. They were just shifting their offerings. Well, an announcement was made by somebody that said, Yeti is no longer supporting the NRA. And that took off. And as a result, people who were either NRA members or had affinity with the NRA in its various positions, started blowing up their Yeti coolers or shooting their Yeti coolers, including Kid Rock, I believe it was, who shot up a Yeti cooler out of protest. And Yeti was like, no, we're not. We are, they didn't even do anything about the NRA. It was just a shift in how they're offering discounts and what kind of programs they're rolling out.
Mm-hmm.
But it took off in this way of targeting Yeti as being against the NRA.
Yeah.
So that was just one unintentional example. And it wasn't as if Yeti was trying to target any social identity. They were just doing their work. But how quickly something that's innocuous can be turned into something that's identity related.
There you go. And so we need to pay attention always and listen and be aware of what the market is saying about our products and services and understand why, what's behind that. Gary, you mentioned sociology as connected to our identity. I think about tribes. I think about when we operate, and still certain parts of the world, people still do operate in tribes and tribal communities. And here, especially in the United States, we've become so individualized that parents and children move and live thousands of miles away from each other. So the family unit and multi-generational people living in the same home is rare, if to find it all. I'm trying to get my arms around what the customer experience as it relates to these different criteria that drive customer loyalty, and where my identity as a connected tribal or connected to my social group fits into my own individual needs for things. You go to this first level: functionality, price, convenience. Those are all kind of the functional connection to loyalty. And where does this, what's the pull, what's the weighting? Obviously it's individual and it moves from time to time, but how does it fit in to what's going to drive my loyalty?
One of the questions we might ask is, are you willing to pay more if your purchase affirms how not only you view yourself as an individual, but how others view you as a group? So we can think about it in those terms, that how I see myself is a function perhaps of me, but nevertheless, I can't project that association with that identity without the agreement of others who belong to that group. You know what I mean? I can't
Mm-hmm.
walk around here professing to be something that I'm not. Well, I can, but people will think I'm, out of my mind. This idea of, I don't know, use the example of I'm a great skateboarder. I identify as a skateboarder. I'm one of those skate punks or whatever the kids
I
call
didn't
them.
know that.
Well, see, you know why you don't know that? Because I don't do it. And so if I went to like the skate park and said, hey guys, how you doing? Want a skateboard? They would go, well, what kind of board do you ride? I'm like, I don't know. I just bought it at, Target.
Yeah.
Automatically, they're like, okay, this is not authentic. Or, if I can dress the part, but not do the action and not be accepted. So it's
Mm-hmm.
this dual part of both being, identifying as and then projecting as so that I'm identifiable as to others. And so going back to purchasing products or having experiences, am I willing to pay more, seek more, go through a longer journey to make a purchasing or a consumer decision to reinforce that identity because it's part of my identity? And we see this, for instance, right now in a certain extent with Stanley thermoses. I'm old enough to remember when Stanley was not cool. And I don't know when Stanley became cool. Stanley was something that was like a thermos my grandfather had. And now all of a sudden it's a status symbol. And it's not just, we think about status symbols, it's not just individual. We can think about it as sociologist Thorsten Veblen talked about as conspicuous consumption. These are identity markers that carry with them social significance. And understanding the significance of or constructing the significance of puts companies or customer experience professionals in a position to understand their target audiences at a deeper level in terms of those social dynamics.
Gary, what would you say? And I want to get to some strategies on how to do this successfully, how to use the information and insights you just shared successfully. But before we do, what are some of the biggest mistakes that companies make in this regard?
Oh, they don't hire a sociologist. It's the first biggest mistake.
Of
And I say that
course.
a little bit tongue in cheek. I mean, speaking in from design field, especially around user experience, more companies are hiring folks like anthropologists to do
Mm,
this work because of their skill set regarding ethnography.
mm,
And I would say that sociologists have, not to necessarily cause any kind of turf war between us and the anthropologists. You talk about a battle that no one would watch is the fight between the sociologists and the anthropologists. But I think that, having people who have a systems perspective, having people who have a multi-methodological background, who have a range of understandings around different social institutions and how people relate to one another, that's a really important resource to have on staff. So I say it kind of tongue in cheek, but I'm also very serious
mhm,
that the sociological insight, or what C. Wright Mills called the sociological imagination, is really important in order to see that big picture and how all these things relate to one another. The other thing is not viewing people more as individuals than members of groups. That's another big mistake. We are individuals, true, but we also exist as members of social groups, both at the micro level and the macro level. We're members of nations, but we're also members of regions, and we're also members of neighborhoods, professional groups, hobby groups, sports affinities, etc. Political identities, all of these things matter, but they don't always matter the same way at the same time. And so thinking about all of that and the intersectionality of those together puts you in a better position to think strategically and align your products, goods, services with the customers you're trying to attract.
Yeah, well, so let's go a little bit deeper on that. How would you say experience design intersects with identity?
One of the things regarding experience design, and this is something I talk a lot with my students, I break down experience design into a number of fundamental features. I talk about it from interaction, perception, memory, emotion, and then going into belonging. Belonging is one of the things in experience design that is often missed and not
Mm,
thought of. And for a book I'm trying to finish up, hopefully this summer, a whole chapter on belonging and creating experiences of belonging and experiences of connection. One of the things we know about people is that we are wired to connect. We are wired to want to belong, to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Talk about tribal nature of ourselves, right? Mark, you mentioned that. We want to belong. And from an evolutionary standpoint, we need to belong. Okay. It's part of our historical DNA. And so rather than creating experiences for the person, create experiences to turn the person into a group. Create communities of the moment by fashioning experiences, whether it be at an event, whether it be in making a buy, whether it be in having a product that connects you to a broader community. I mean, we talk about Apple. One of the things that makes Apple powerful is I'm an Apple person. I mean, I'm not. I have a Samsung phone, but you don't hear people say I'm an Android person.
mm, mm,
I have an Android,
mhm,
but I'm an Apple person. That's that's an identity cue right there.
mm.
How people describe themselves. So even I'm teaching a course on qualitative data analysis coming up, and even looking at your focus groups, your interviews, your customer feedback at that level of identity marker and identity display gives you some insight into the power of identity in constructing experiences, whether it be connecting to others through a product or through the process of buying the product. You're now part of a larger community and family through making this purchase.
Hmm. Yeah, we talk about loyalty and the difference between loyalty and advocacy. as you go across the customer life cycle, and advocates have a tendency not only to repeat purchase but defend the brand.
Hmm.
They see the brand as part of their own personal identity. In some cases, I shared a post a while back on fans of Apple, and they had an Apple tattoo on their arm.
Sure.
you know so you've got identity as part of a reflection or an outcome of the loyalty they feel to the brand. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah, and this reminds me of Iron Man, the Iron Man Corporation. Now, Iron Man is a race, but it's also a corporation, the World
Mm,
Triathlon Corporation.
mm,
And you see people with Iron Man tattoos. And I've done a couple Iron Mans, never got a tattoo because I don't want to advertise for free. And it's such a huge part of the identity, you know. And when you cross the finish line, you have the announcer, Mike Riley, say, "You are an Iron Man." When I bought a Mazda, I liked the car. No one yelled out, "You are a Mazda owner." It was
mm-hmm,
kind of like, "Hey, here are the keys. Great."
mm-hmm.
And the salesperson was fine,
Yeah.
but it felt like a little bit of a letdown because I didn't feel like something bigger than myself. Jeep owners are like this. They have the whole rubber
Mm.
duck thing,
Ah.
right? That,
Mm.
the Jeep owner vibe, it's a thing. It's,
Yeah.
people talk about it as a culture. What's up with those Jeep owners? Well, saying those Jeep owners
Yeah.
tells you there's a collective
Yeah.
versus saying Jeep owners. Even that one little modifier, those Jeep owners, lets me know as a qualitative researcher and a sociologist, there's something deeper going on there that we need to tap into that's really powerful. That when you buy that Jeep, there's gift giving associated with it from other Jeep owners. How cool is that? Maybe another product where that happens.
Yeah. You're part of community.
You're part of a community, and people want to feel part of a community, especially in our alienated times where people feel disconnected at a greater level despite social media or because of social media. I want to feel part of something larger than myself. I mean, it's literally written as the motto of the United States: out of many, one. The very motto of the United States is about belonging.
Mm-hmm. Great
And
point. That
well,
is a
thank
great
you.
point.
I do this for a living. I appreciate that. Yeah, but it's one of those things we reflect on is we like to become part of something bigger than ourselves. And to what extent can our purchases make that possible? And I'm not advocating rampant just consumption here. What I mean is, if someone is buying something, then is there a way of making their experience more meaningful because it's not just about them, but about us? And that becomes the secret sauce of belonging and creating experiences.
So making the experience more meaningful because it's a part of not just a part of them, it's a part of us.
Yeah, it's not just a part of me or it's a
Yeah.
part of we,
We.
right? Moving from me, it's about me to it's about we. It can be both, right? If it's about we, it can also be about me. But if it's just about me, it's not going to probably be about we. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
we, kind of as an umbrella thing that happens, but with me and we. But
Yeah.
so we make it about we, make it about us, and that this product, your engagement with us is going to allow you to become part of something bigger through the act of being a customer.
One of the things we talk about is this idea of story and the hero versus the guide.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And we talk about, if you want to help someone, be their guide, try not to be a hero. They're not looking for another hero. And one of the things we try to think about is not just the external things that they're saying they need. This would be the example. I
Right.
need a cup to drink from, but the internal needs, which is, I care about whatever it is. But the philosophical needs is the way things ought to be, the way things should be. And I'm thinking about some of the things that you're talking about and designing products and the way things ought to be. Like we ought to have a cleaner environment. Some people are very passionate. We ought to
Right.
have, the right to bear arms. We ought to have much stricter gun laws on the other side of that and restrictions. We ought to, whatever, fill in the blank. And then that becomes a deeper need that people can feel passionate about is these philosophical needs. I was thinking of an example of a bank that I work for. But as we think about then again from the C-suite and how CX leaders can think about how they can move stakeholders, build this guiding coalitions and move stakeholders along, is the bank I work for. I don't talk about the bank I work for a whole lot because it's just one bank. But we talked about Sandy Spring Bank from here for 150 years.
Yeah.
So the idea that is we are you are us. We live and work in the community.
Right.
We started from a local group of farmers and merchants who didn't trust the big banks and the federal government at the time of the Civil War. So we are like you, and you are part of us. And
Yep.
I think what do you? I see your head shaking, and those of
Yeah.
you on audio can't see that. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's crucially important. One of the things that, as we were talking, reminds me, I think does a good job of this is somebody like Dr. Bronner's. If you've ever looked at if anybody's not familiar with Dr. Bronner's, it was this weird bottle of liquid soap with all these funky sayings and, verses and whatever it was on the label, which any designer would look at and have a heart attack. It's like, yeah, I can't like, what's happening here? It's not a clean design. I mean, it's clearly the rantings of a lunatic. And then you kind of go into the history and the current positioning of Dr. Bronner's, and they have a really great Instagram program, is this larger connection. Another really good one, and I'm gonna blank on it right now, but it's the meat sheets that you get frozen in, and that you can, Steakums is the one. So
Oh, okay.
Steakums Twitter campaign is all about critical thinking.
Mm,
It barely mentions anything about the product. And when they do, it's in
yeah.
a very dismissive, almost disparaging thing. They call it frozen meat sheets, which is what they are if you look at them. But it's kind of spoken to this, it's filling this broader need and this broader movement of using social media to inform and educate and guard against the dangers of misinformation and disinformation. And so they get a lot of traction because of establishing this almost oasis of thinking in a social media wasteland,
Mm,
so to speak. And that's like, so how is that social identity? Well, how do I think about myself? And how do I think about myself as a person who follows this, who knows about this? Now I'm in the know about something special and I follow it. So I have an identity with that kind of brand. And I'm a vegetarian,
mm,
but I follow Steakums and I like their content on Twitter. I don't think I've ever had a Steakums in my life,
mm.
but here I am talking about it and I remember it. And it's, reading that even for a moment is a good, memorable experience because it's speaking to something deeper and bigger than just the product itself.
Mm. So along those lines, let's talk about if you think about one or two strategies that leaders can use to succeed in this area.
So one thing that I would recommend folks doing as a very practical thing, and if you can't do this yourself, call me. I can help you with it. If I had a group of customers I was either currently had and wanted to retain or wanted to try to gain as part of my customer base, I would do something like an identity inventory and a social identity wheel, just to get a sense of the different layers and levels where they sit in terms of their social identity. For instance, real quick, I did a larger study of ultramarathon runners. And one of the things that surfaced through about ultramarathon runners in terms of their identity is they really didn't care about the results. Didn't matter. It was all
Hmm.
about the experience and the camaraderie of being out there in the trails with other people, and also the challenge of doing that kind of event, which might be a 50K or a 50 mile or a 100 mile or whatever. And so if I was trying to position my product as this will help you win,
Mm,
that would be wrong. It would be
mhm,
antithetical to the
mm,
ethos of the group identity.
mhm,
So figuring out what identities matter to people, number one, which ones are most salient, then going into, after you have that, how do they intersect with one another? So I'm not just a runner, I'm a male runner who's middle-aged. So
mhm,
how do those things intersect
mhm,
versus a female runner? And those, I could talk a whole lot about running while female as an issue. And then also then think about what matters to those groups. in general, and then at the intersectional levels. And then how, can we map on our current products, our current approaches, our current engagement in the experiences we create? Can we map on those things in relation to those identities, and how do they fit? How do they align or misalign? So those would be kind of the steps I would go through to figure out how are we addressing those social identity aspects of our customers, both current and hopefully future.
And let me go one level deeper on that same thought pattern is to what I hear a little bit, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is really a persona, an identification of who are the people I'm serving.
No, I think that's right. But except rather than viewing the persona as at an individual level, you know, Sally is a, 32-year-old mother who works full time. A lot of personas are individually oriented.
Hmm.
Do you have a line there that's about social identity?
Got it. Got it. That's a key. So, Gem, mark it down. Multidimensional persona, not just one dimensional about the person.
Social dimensional personas. Yep,
What social dimension are they connected to?
exactly.
I was thinking about application. There you go. Knowing another deeper level as we think about customer experience management, it's easy to fall into the trap of saying, I understand the social identity. I'm going to advertise or promote or package, so to speak, my product this way, and I'll have this. And when we think about experience, it's also, some people say that marketing is the promise the brand has, experience is delivering on that promise. So we then, and I want you to just shed some light on this for me, is to deliver the experience in a way that aligns with what you've understood as their social identity,
Hmm. Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
so talk a little bit about how that plays out, how that might look.
Yeah, and I don't want people to hear social identity just meaning social causes. Okay,
Mhm.
I
Right.
mean, social identity, however it's expressed, felt, and demonstrated in everyday social life. So, in terms of what that might look like, I think about folks who have done it really well might be sports teams. I mean, there's a really interesting thing right now around the LA Clippers
Hmm.
with the I think it's I forgot the name of the arena. It might be the Intuit Arena. Anyway, the owner of the Clippers is creating a new arena. And the idea behind certain elements of the arena is certain areas will be for super fans, my word, only. And we're going to create an experience that is for fans. I mean, often if you go to a sporting event, if you watch one on TV, the people who are sitting closer to the field are there by virtue of not being the biggest fans, but having the right connections or having
Right.
enough money to buy those seats. Okay. So you might be
Right.
placing your most rabid fan potentially further away because there is a potential that that fan can't afford to get closer to the field. So the loudly cheering fans might be up top, out of camera view, and further away from the field. So what they're doing with LA Clippers as they're designing this new space is intentionally creating spaces of engagement and experience for fans of a particular type. And they're even going so far as you can't sit there if you sit down more than you stand up, and there's sensors in the seats. And there's audio meters to determine how much cheering is going on and how loud it is. I mean, so there's all kinds of levels here. And I'm not advocating that, but I am
Mm.
saying it's creating a certain experience of belonging because like all experiences of belonging, they are amplified when everyone is doing the same thing at the same time. This is why religious ceremonies are so powerful when you're in the middle of it all, because we're all engaged in it together in the same way. And so can we create spaces in which those who are not just like-minded, but like acted, where they can demonstrate that. And through that process of joint and mutual engagement, we create a higher level experience as a result because we're all doing it together.
And the link there, of course, is, and I want to keep coming back to this, is higher level of engagement, higher level of loyalty translates to repeat customers who love your brand and come back and tell their friends about it.
Yeah, greater memories, greater sharing on social media, greater conversation about what kind of time that was and how fun it was. And then going back to the sports example, one of the challenges that sporting teams have is that you can have a better perspective on the action on your 4K television, have no line at the bathroom, and not worry about spending $12 for a beer or whatever, or,
Hmm.
$15 for nachos. How do I get people to the stadium? What is happening here that is better than what's happening at your home? And one of the things that we know is if you've ever watched a sporting event at home by yourself and something exciting happened, there's no one around to cheer with you.
Right.
It's a different kind of experience because you're experiencing it separately. And so, how do we create that experience of engagement in person so that it elevates naturally by virtue of it being connected with others?
Perfect. Perfect. Gary, some amazing wisdom. I am so glad we had this chance to talk. I have one more question that I always
Sure.
ask my guests at the end, which is what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Well, I was thinking about this. I would say something to the effect of, you see that guy over there? Don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
And that
Just
would not be the guy on the other side of the microphone here.
no, it's always that guy. Everyone knows who that guy is.
Ah,
Yeah, it's not you.
okay.
You're Mark. I'm talking about
Yeah,
that guy.
that guy.
And I do think it speaks to a larger question of critical thinking, right? And being able to think for yourself a bit, but also not just be contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. This is what I push my students on all the time, but
Mm,
it's being able to develop your own analytic skills so that you can generate your own insights, which can lead to new solutions and innovative ideas. I mean, that's the point, right? So,
mhm,
no matter who that guy is, I go back to Ronald Reagan with the Soviets, trust but verify. Right?
mhm.
All right, I can listen, but how do I know you really know what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And part of what we have to do as trusted advisors, right, is to
Mhm.
figure out how to generate that trust and how to communicate and connect, going back to connection, in a way that gets people to trust us. And just to kind of close the circle, nothing gets people to trust someone more than when they see them as a member of their group or tribe.
Mm. You're one of me.
You're one of me and we're one of us. And
Mm.
therefore, automatically, I'm going to trust you more even without knowing you. And so when I say, "You see that guy over there? Don't trust what he says." Yeah. How do you get them to then trust? It's a social accomplishment, not just it's not just a individual feeling. It's a social trust is a social accomplishment. And so we have to earn trust by demonstrating who we are, how we align, and that we are connected with whomever we want to get trusted by.
Mm. Well said. Well said. Gary, thank you so much. You have your own podcast, and in addition, I want to put a plug in for Bentley University. I had my daughter went to school there, and it's a fine school. And Gary is one of the most esteemed professors there.
Who have you been talking to?
I know you, and I know you are, and you could tell by listening to this show how much wisdom there is there. Gary, share with people your podcast where they can listen, and also if they want to get a hold of you for any reason, what would be a good way?
Sure. Thanks. The podcast is Experience by Design podcast, where we explore experience designs of all kinds. And I co host it with Dr. Adam Gamwell, who is an anthropologist. So we definitely take the social science approach to experience design across the gamut. So not just customer, but user, patient, student, digital brand, you name it, we cover it. And you can find us and wherever you get podcasts, as well as experiencexdesign.com. And if folks want to get a hold of me, you can always get a hold of me at Gary@GaryConnects.com. It's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Yeah, or look me up at Bentley University. Bentley's been there for almost 25 years now. It'll be 25 years in August. And it's a place that I really enjoy being because it sees the value of arts and sciences and businesses coming together, which is also why I love experience design, because there's no better field in which we can see arts and science, social science, and business coming together.
Beautiful. Gary, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Thanks for listening to the Delighted Customers podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode or any of my other ones, hit subscribe or follow. I've got a lot of other great guests that are coming up and a lot of other great content, and I don't want you to miss anything. You can find any links or references on the show in the show notes, and you can find those at my website at empoweredcx.com. That's EMPOWEREDCX.com. Also, make sure to check out the other shows in the Agile Brand Podcast Network by going to www.agilebrandguide.com. The Delighted Customers podcast with Mark Slayton is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content.
The Agile brand.
Whether you're looking to build a website for your business, your hobby, your podcast, or just for fun, Pair Networks is your go-to web hosting partner. Not only do we have the lowest domain price in the industry, starting at just $11, we've got hundreds of stunning website templates to help you stand out from the crowd. You're not a techie? Not a problem. With our easy DIY site builders, you can launch your impressive website without any technical know-how. And when it comes to security and updates, don't worry, we've got you covered. Our 24/7 US-based customer support is the best in the industry. Check out pair.com today to learn more. PAIR.com.